Welcome to Breaking Barriers. You know your path. We know the obstacles, and we can teach you how to tear them down. And now your host, CEO and founder of Adapting Social, John Vigero.
Guys, welcome back to Breaking Barriers. I'm really stoked about this podcast because number one, not only do I love the product, but I'm obsessed with this salsa. Okay. And Tommy, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. What you've done and your team has done in this space is insane. What I will say real quick with and now again, I want to make sure it's Jalapa Jar.
It's Jalapa Jar.
That's what I said. My wife's like, no, it's Jalapa. All right, so say it one more time.
Jalapa Jar. So
Jalapa Jar.
Think of the jalapeno, although we've sort of bastardized the pronunciation just because the alliteration of Jalapa Jar is just too fun. Can't go wrong.
Yeah. So my wife is like, she doesn't play games with salsa, and so the context for everybody listening here, how we got here on this phone call here today on this podcast with Tommy. So my sister flies in. She lives in Florida. She's like, hey, I got to run to Whole Foods, and my wife at the time just got stocked up with salsa. Like every time she hits the grocery store, because we're like cereal, like chipping, like dippers. So she's like, she got like all of her stock ready. So long story short, my sister's at Whole Foods. She goes, hey, I'm going to pick up some salsa. My wife goes, no, I just got a bunch. Don't get it. So my sister calls me and she goes, hey, she was staying with us. And she's like, you guys got to try the salsa. You're going to love it. And I'm like, gee, Jack's gonna freak out. She just bought all this salsa. So luckily,
throw away.
Right. So luckily, thank God, she freaking was like, I'm gonna buy it anyway. And she buys it anyway, brings it in. My wife's like, what the heck? We bought all the salsa. You don't need to buy extra salsa. She's like, just try it. So literally later on that day, we're sitting there, we're watching a movie. Boom, hit the see We're like, all right, let's see what this thing is. And we had the sweet and heat. And my God, that is so damn good.
Thank you.
So how did you get started with this? That's the real question.
First of all, I owe your sister a debt of gratitude, so I appreciate that. She's kind of the ideal customer when we started this, which is the person who says, shows up to a Friday night dinner party and is like, no, you have to have this, whether
That's
it's
what she did.
their favorite wine, their favorite beer, their favorite, hummus, or in our case, fresh salsa. We felt like if we can get people like that excited about our product, hopefully they influence, right? They're the early adopters who go out and right. Force their brother and their sister-in-law to try it out. So thank you very much, wherever you may be. So yeah, I have the difficult challenge here of describing how delicious the salsa can be to those who can only listen and can't necessarily see or taste it. But hopefully by the end of this, everyone wants to run to their local Whole Foods and try it out. But started the company with my cousin back in 2015, 2016. Came from more of like a tech and business development background, just sort of like wanted to get excited about having like a product to make and see if we could sell. And my business partner, my cousin, came from Wall Street, so he kind of had like the finance and the money management background, if you will, and also had a little bit of seed capital to get us started. And we literally had an idea board with probably 5 or 6 different ideas on it. And I had just moved back from a previous job that had me over in London. And I was just obsessed walking into a Fairway, which your Northeast listeners know a good Fairway. It's similar to a Whole Foods or Sprouts. I mean, you don't just have an apple; you have 50 kinds of apples, and there's abundance. And I missed that because in London it was sparse picking. So I was just making salsa for just sort of shits and giggles. It was just good to sort of be back around fresh produce and be making something. And eventually, Steve's now wife, was saying, "Look, you guys want to start a business? You got these couple ideas. Maybe they're good, maybe they're not. But that's the best salsa I've ever had. Like, why don't you just try to sell that?" And so we were that naive and thought it was that simple. Basically, we just figured, okay, well, the startup capital for something like a food business, at least, it gets more expensive. But at the beginning, it's like, look, you can buy a couple jars, you can maybe get a logo done, you can throw a sticker on it, go to your local farmer's market for a fairly nominal startup, amount of capital. And so my financially inclined cousin was a little bit more excited about that. He was like, all right, I can maybe lose 20 grand here, but we'll see if we have something. Whereas, some of the other ideas that we had, might have taken a much larger startup capital, and you still don't really know if you're going to be successful. So we were that kind of simple with it. And we were fortunate enough to get right into Smorgasburg, which For those that don't know, Smorgasburg in the New York City area is kind of like the tourist farmers market, if you will. Everybody takes a turn going through Smorgasburg on a nice weather day out in Brooklyn. They get probably 10 to 15,000 people to go through there, and it's a food court effectively. It's about a food truck setup. So it kind of gave us a little bit of wind in our sails at the beginning. We figured they have a pretty good curation team, and you kind of have to pass that test first. And we thought, well, gosh, if they like it, that'd be we might be onto something. And we've seen a few other brands that have done well in the New York City area that sort of like got their start in Smorgasburg. So that was kind of like step one on the growth strategy was, all right, if we get into Smorgasburg, then we can, maybe do X, Y, Z. So, and again, it was, I think we showed up to the first couple of weeks with literally just some mason jars with the word salsa written on them. It's like basic as can be. We hadn't even really officially come up with a name or spent any money on branding, but the idea was just sort of like, let's just see that like people besides mom and dad and, our cousins and friends like it. Like, let's go find actual customers who get excited. So, that's kind of how we got going. And then Smorgasburg, again, being a food truck kind of environment, is a little more conducive to people that want to go and try a bunch of different things to eat, not just take a jar of salsa home, let alone, we had people from, international people walking by going, okay, I got to fly home with this. Is that okay? And we're like, well, it's fresh. You kind of can't exactly take a 10-hour flight back to Europe and have salsa leaking in your luggage. So, so we started making breakfast tacos. It was kind of lacking in the New York food scene at the time, and it sort of goes well with tacos. With salsa. I'm from Austin, or grew up down in Texas, and I spent a lot of time in Austin, where the food, the breakfast tacos kind of king, and we just thought, let's just, how hard can it be? Let's try to be also a food service, quick service restaurant, and make this fresh salsa. But it gave us sort of a head start in terms of building our name. It was popular at Smorgasburg. We ended up with a subway station location in Brooklyn Heights, where it was about I think 100 square feet or something. Like, it was like the smallest space you could find, but it was like cheap and affordable. It's like, all right, if we can ever see if this business will float beyond Smorgasburg, which brings in the audience and has the brand name, here's as good of a place to try it as anywhere. And so we started slinging tacos in a subway station, which brought us some notoriety. It was kind of novel. So all of a sudden, I think the day we opened, we had a couple of news agencies come by, and I think Seth Meyers made fun of us on late night television, saying, "Oh, great, there's a breakfast taco place with the rats, the subway system." It's just sort of like all tongue in cheek, but it was just, you couldn't script, getting that kind of like attention right off the bat, especially in New York City, such a competitive space for attention. What's going on next and whatever. So all that kind of just put some wind in our sails, put some money in the pocket to kind of, keep developing the salsa recipes. The biggest thing we needed to do at the beginning, I understand the spirit of this podcast, right, is breaking barriers. One of the things we had to do is sort of prove our shelf life. A fresh product in the food Bible, if you will. If you're making a fresh salsa in your home kitchen, you'll get about a 2 to 3 week shelf life on it. There's a little bit of acidity from your tomatoes. In our case, we put some lime juice and red wine vinegar in there. It gives it some natural preservation. And if you keep it refrigerated, you're going to sort of limit bacterial growth, and you get like sort of the blessing, if you will, that's good enough. Or you fully pasteurize it, which is what you get with the Tostitos, or even if you're something looking at like Rao's or Ragu, the Italian sauce aisle, similar products, similar ingredients, mostly governed by acidity. But if you pasteurize it, you get a year plus, because you're sort of eliminating all the bacterial growth components of air and water activity and things like that. But our argument was always, but that's why it sucks. You open up a Tostitos, you open up anything else that you get in a dry aisle of the grocery store, open up at Rao's versus making your own tomato sauce at home. It's going to be just extra acidic. It's just going to lose all that zip and flavor, because what you'd end up doing is you cook it to such a degree that you cook out all the sort of like smaller notes, like in our case, our cilantro, our cumin. These are the smaller tasting notes. They're only like 1% of the recipe, or maybe even 0.5% of the recipe. But when you cook it to pasteurize it, you're reducing that to zero, basically. So you're just left with like tomato paste with a varying kick, depending on what jalapeno or habanero or whatever you put in there. So we just were committed to keeping it fresh. We felt like, not being people from the food and CPG industry, we weren't ready to go to battle the way that your average CPG company tends to go to battle. It just requires a lot of trade spend, which is your promos, your demos, things like that. It just requires a lot of pushing to get the product in front of people. You imagine going to your favorite grocery store, there's tens of thousands of brands. And we have subsequently had to learn, that playbook, if you will. But the initial push was like, if I can't just put this in front of somebody who has no opinion on salsa, doesn't really care, thinks it's all the same, and have them go, oh, that's way better than that, then we're in over our head here. So we knew that if we kept it fresh, we would at least have that sort of value proposition and that like argument, if you will.
Yeah.
And so we just stayed stubborn and naive and dumb, and the breakfast tacos kind of kept the lights on while we figured out how to get the shelf life to what it is now, which is 17 weeks, and we could ship it all the way across to Hawaii.
That's so sick, man. How the heck did you guys break into Whole Foods?
We got a little lucky. Whole Foods they've got a couple of reputations that, most people think of when they think of Whole Foods. The chief one is probably a whole paycheck, right? They get slapped with that a little bit. It is a little bit more of a pricier grocery store. But I give them a lot of credit. They put a lot of money where their mouth is in terms of like being a leader in the space of trying to find what's next and what's new. They had sort of really low barriers to entry for new products and small brands.
Right.
In the Brooklyn community, we had some shared kitchen experience as we were getting our feet under us before we built our own kitchen here in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, where, you just meet lots of other founders, and, everyone had a similar story where like you at least get like a look from them in ways that a lot of the other grocery stores sort of put up a lot of walls. So there's a guy by the name of Chris Monka, who was at the time the local forager, they call him. And there's sort of like one of those per every region.
Right.
And his job is pretty cool. He gets to just go around looking for new cool products.
Wow.
He kind of found us in some ways. Because we were doing that's why I still include the breakfast taco on the subway station part of our story, is because that is kind of what brought him to us. We're kind of made a little bit of a name for ourselves and a little bit of headway with some of that publicity. And so he came to grab tacos one day and said, hey, this is, kind of cool. I think at the time they were kicking around the idea of adding sort of like more of like a food court to Whole Foods locations. They've subsequently kind of passed on that idea. But at the time he was like, look, I want to put maybe a Jalapa Jar in one or two locations in our city stores.
Right.
And I said, great, if you do that, I want to get my salsa on the shelf. So how do we do that? So one word brought another. We never ended up doing, and they never really ended up doing the food court idea, but it gave us a seat at the table to talk about our salsa. Our shelf life at the time was still only 3 weeks, so it was very much a leap of faith that we figured, well, if they think it's good enough to distribute and sell with only a 3-week shelf life, then we'll take their word at it and we'll figure it out. I think within a couple of weeks of being on shelf in the New York City locations, we quickly were able to get our shelf life to where we finally got the lab results back that gave us the green light for 16 weeks. And then, it just became more viable. So, very fortunate. Chris is a big part of our story. The fact he just sort of happened to come by and check it out. And, the fact we were making breakfast tacos kind of gave us that, just the right ingredients to get lucky, I guess, if you will.
Thank God for Chris, man. I'm happy I'm happy you met Chris too.
Hey, likewise.
But so on our podcast, we have a lot of people who comment in, and before we have a guest on, we'll put out like, hey, here's who's coming on. One of the things that was asked was, if you were to go back to the 2015, what would you do differently knowing what you know now? Like how you would have started and what you would have done and any sort of knowledge or people or connections you got along the way? Like, is there anything you would have done that you could give advice to people who are starting early phase in a product space like this?
I feel like I can give the advice more so than I would sort of reconfigure what we did. I think we needed the naivety, however you pronounce it, in the sense that if what I know now would make it so that we probably would have never started. I mean,
right.
What I was referencing before with the trade spend, all the amount of money that, companies in this space tend to spend, and a lot of the sort of barriers to entry that a lot of grocery stores have that just sort of make it pay to play to even get on the shelf would make you pretty much feel like this is, impossible. And you want to raise a ton of money. And by doing that, you give away a lot more equity and a lot more of your company. So we were kind of fortunate that we didn't know any of those things, and I would almost shield that, from ourselves if we had a time machine. And I would give your listeners that same kind of advice. That you sort of need to stay a little bit nimble and naive, and don't worry about what it needs. Everybody's always asking you, where do you see yourself in 3 years? Where do you see yourself?
Yeah.
Let me see your pitch deck and all that stuff. And you need to have a rough sketch of that type of stuff, but kind of just need to stay focused on what's right in front of you. And in our case, again, with Whole Foods, it was figuring out the distribution and getting the product to those stores. And then we, were able to leverage that to get into more locations through different regions. So the product started to go further away from our kitchen in New York. And we didn't quite know how we might support it if it didn't do well, but we were fortunate that, people like your sister were in all those other areas. There were lots of other, folks looking for new products who were apt to try it. And we were kind of in the right location for that, which is another piece of advice I would give, which is just, we were very limited with who we went after. We were very aim small, miss small, if you will. And with Whole Foods, it was very much, that's where our customer is. So sure, you can find salsa at every grocery store, every gas station throughout the country, but those that are looking to spend maybe an extra $1 or $2 on it, are probably going to be shopping at Whole Foods or a Sprouts or maybe a Target, that kind of thing. So we were very focused on that, which, at times has been limiting. And certainly people in our circles have asked us, how do you grow quicker? Or, how do you start to scale a little bit, this and that. But for us also, at least within the CPG and food space, Whole Foods has 500 plus locations. It gets you nationwide distribution. Again, another thing we were naive about that sort of benefited us because we stumbled into it was their main distributor, which there's two main distributors in the sort of natural space, Unify and KeHE. They have distribution centers that are set up throughout the country. It's like a war map. You need little beachheads in different places where your product has to get to, that they can then distribute it into each of those regions.
Right.
Having Whole Foods bring us in sort of gave us enough leverage to sort of go to that distributor and say, you're taking on this product, but it's going to sell because I've already got 20 locations of Whole Foods in that area. So you can reliably count on this product, not just sort of sitting on your shelf, which they tend to not like, right? Is you have this sort of built-in customer base with that. So it gave us some advantages, even though, at times, we've been jealous of some shelf-stable products who could be a little bit more aggressive with their sales growth, because you go and make 100,000 units of your product and you go try to sell as many of them as possible. With us, it's a little bit more like, all right, we'll make what we know we're selling next week. And we keep it pretty small. So I guess didn't quite answer your question, so I apologize. But
I think that was that was such a big golden nugget, though, because I heard this forever back, but I remember Steve Jobs always said you have to be hungry and you have to be foolish. You have to be foolish enough to get out there and be naive, right? And like not know all of the barriers that are already against you, especially in the food product industry with shelf life and competition on shelf and all these different components. Like know what you know now, right? It's like, I get it. It's like, you wouldn't have probably done it. You're like, oh, look at what we're up against. So I think that makes a ton of sense. One of the things that I find so interesting though, too, is like, well, first off, how many stores are you guys in now?
So we're in the Whole Foods footprint in the U.S., which is about 490 stores.
Wow.
And then we're in a handful more in the Northeast region where we have a second distribution relationship that'll put us in some bodegas and some smaller chain grocery stores. And then we're actually right now in the process of onboarding our first broker. So they'll then represent us and try to sell us into more more natural and specialty grocery stores throughout the country.
I love it. I love it.
Never had. I know, it's exciting. We finally can kind of have an army of the cavalry's finally coming to help us.
I love it.
Sell. So
I love it. You have the troops marching. The one thing though, too, I will say, so for anybody listening to this right now, I am not fucking kidding you. This is the best salsa on the fucking planet I've ever tasted. And again, me and my wife are big salsa people. We always try different salsas all the time. We don't like the typical Tostitos stuff. And the funny part is, so to finish that story earlier, so my sister brings it. We had that movie. We wound up eating it. We tanked the whole jar, like instantly, like that. We were like, the movie wasn't even done yet. And I was like, do we have any more of this? My sister's like, no, I only grabbed one because you guys were yelling at me. So literally, I forget from that time to when I remember in my front porch, there was a styrofoam freezer bag or a box. And I'm like, what is this, Jacqueline? And she's like, oh, I ordered more of the salsa. And I'm like, what do you mean? I thought it was only in Whole Foods. She goes, no, you can order directly from them too. So she ordered like a freaking case or whatever the hell that thing is. We're on our second order right now, by the way. So it just came like 2 days ago.
Nice.
And we tried medium for the first time. Because we tried the regular one and then the sweet and heat.
Pineapple, right? Yeah.
Correct. So we tried the pineapple, but the pineapple one fucks all day, every day, and twice on Sunday, baby.
Dude,
but the whole thing though is like now it's like for people out there, I'm telling you, like if you are into that stuff, and you want to blow people's minds, that's the go-to. Like that, any of these sauces, the medium, I was like, damn, like this is good, and it had a nice little spice to it too. I was like,
yeah.
oh shit. But I'm talking about the development of the product line. You guys plan to roll out more stuff? Like, what's in the future for you guys?
Well, first of all, I love that story because especially when we only had a couple weeks shelf life, a lot of people would ask, what's your shelf life? I said, well, most people tend to eat it in like a day or two. Not really the answer they're looking for, and it sounds a little full of ourselves, but you're a case in point of like, no, once you pop it, people plow through it, and I think that's something that I think the average person probably has salsa like at the Super Bowl, right? And if you're buying Tostitos or paste picante sauce or any of that sort of jarred shelf-stable stuff, your mindset is sort of like, yeah, I have it, but you never end up using it because it's not good. So you put it out at a dinner party or at a Super Bowl party, but then it goes in the back of your fridge because it doesn't excite you to like want to use it. Whereas with a fresh product, you want to put it on your eggs in the morning, and you find out you marinate chicken with it. Like there's lots of other uses for it. So product lines, we started, and the idea was like, let's make the best like hero product, as they call it. Like, let's make the best red salsa possible, and like let's not get too crazy. Part of it was just like personal preference and annoyance with if you walk down it happens in a lot of categories, but in the salsa aisle there's a mango, and then there's a bean and corn, and there's sort of all these like standard SKUs, and I don't really love it. And also just on top of that, I thought that seems confusing to know, well, how much do you make of each flavor?
Right.
How do you know if you're going to sell any of that mango and things like that? So we just said, let's just make the best, red salsa that we could. And obviously you need a little bit of variance in heat when it comes to making a salsa. So we have our mild, medium, and hot. The tomatillo came naturally just because a lot of expectation from those eating Tex-Mex or eating, salsa. They expect a tomatillo-based green salsa, so we have one of those. And the pineapple just came because we make it. And again, a lot of folks' favorite CPGs tend to be made by a co-packer, which no shame in that. Most products you get to a certain scale, you do need some help making it. Co-packers basically have the financial capital to go and invest in big equipment that'll help you do that. But we just sort of knew we needed to maintain control, otherwise our product would get bastardized a little bit. I mean, it's kind of the nature of the business. If you're a co-packer, you got to find ways to save pennies making it, and eventually you start using less quality tomatoes, or you shortcut things. We just said, no, we have to maintain making it. We'll find some other ways to cut costs, or help our ability to scale. We need to be able to make this and maintain its quality. So because we do that, we're always just messing around in the kitchen. And so as we built our kitchen here in the Navy Yard to sort of be able to start to scale while maintaining manufacturing the product ourselves, it just, if you go to a co-packer, they're going to want some sort of minimum quantity. So they got to take time out of their line and their equipment usage in order to make your product. You need to make it worth it for them. So now you got to make 100,000 jars of mango salsa, even if you don't know it's going to sell. Right. In our case, we're here every day, and we have a little taco stand. So if any of your listeners are in Brooklyn, we're open Monday through Friday to sell breakfast tacos from 11 to 3. It just gives us a test audience of people that we can try. So right now we're doing a smoked pumpkin and poblano. That's kind of the seasonal fall special. And through that process is where we came up with the pineapple salsa. It was summertime. I thought it'd be kind of cool to mess around with, because of my distaste for mango as like sort of the standard CPG expectation of a fruit salsa. I said, well, can we do something slightly different? And we just started messing around with the pineapple. What I love about it is it's not very pineapple-y. It's really well balanced. It's got a nice hint. It's sort of just a little extra sweeter than your standard red tomato-based salsa because of the pineapple, but it's not a pineapple salsa. It's still a salsa that just happens to have a hint of pineapple, which I think is what makes it work, and it's still perfect, edible. Yeah,
it's perfect. Don't touch it.
You got it. We won't mess with that.
Don't you fucking touch it, Tommy. That thing is perfect. I love it. And that's not just a seasonal one, right? That's all year round, obviously, right?
So that we kind of graduated to making year round. We started to get some.
Thank God, you scared me there for a second. Wait a second.
We had it some Whole Foods for a little bit, and we're hoping to get it back in all the Whole Foods. So when they took us national, they took just the red. So it kind of gave us like another aim small, miss small moment. Let's just make our core product, make sure we get people hooked on it in new places that are trying it out for the first time. And we're hoping, again, with the sales agency, we'll be able to put the tomatillo, the pineapple. I'd love to get a rotating seasonal. I think that would be really cool to be able to do like a spring and summer and maybe fall type salsa that you can find. They do it in beer. Why not in salsa?
Why not? Yeah, why not? Honestly, it's funny. The only time now we'll get you guys at Whole Foods it was when we're between the delivery shipment stuff. That's the only time
If
we'll
you
go
get
to
the
Whole.
delivery and you're subsidizing in the middle, that's you're one of our ideal customers.
I think I have an addiction, Tommy. And my sister put me on it. But so talk to me a little bit about so we're getting close to the end here, and I always like to ask certain questions. So talk to me about, like, is there anything in your time as, running a business, and also just in your history? Obviously you're well traveled and you worked in London and, from Texas and stuff. And so, like, when it comes to resilience, because obviously I'm sure with this business you've had your challenges and the things that come with every business. Is there anything that you think about as like an adage or a quote when it comes to resilience that reminds you of your journey?
It's a good question. Yeah, aim small, win small, which I've already used multiple times, is certainly something that, from like a strategy standpoint, I kind of cling to. Don't fall in love with your product. Get out there and make sure other people love it and that it works as a product in the marketplace, not just because you might love it. Is something, another mantra. Resilience. I'm trying to think. I mean, I don't know if there's like a standard quote, but I remember sitting in the car with Steve, my business partner, right as we were kind of kicking off the whole idea ideation process, and saying, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to start a business together. I said, basically everybody, especially those closest to you, will probably be the biggest doubters and naysayers. They'll feel really comfortable. And you have to sort of just have like an inner steel of, like, staying focused and sort of stubborn, because usually the people closest to you love you, so they don't want to see you get hurt or fail or
correct
need to borrow money or any of that kind of stuff. So they tend to be the most cautious, when you're starting this out, which is tough, because then all of a sudden the people that you maybe socialize with and spend most of your time with and certainly look to for love and guidance are usually the ones that sort of are a little bit more afraid and aren't necessarily celebrating every little step, along with you, which makes it very insular. So that builds up some resilience for sure, because you sort of need to have, an inner sense of, an inner compass of knowing, if you're still going in the right direction, and how to stay committed to going in that direction. Obviously you want to see the product, the ball go through the hoop, if you will, and you want to see that there's success that you're staying, stubborn for. But even as we were starting to go on shelf at Whole Foods and having what looked like on the outside would be success, there, there's plenty of questions and what are we doing here? Both of us have now started families. I've got two little ones at home, and then the questions get a little more serious. You're not just doing this because you just want to prove yourself as an entrepreneur or something. This is now affecting your family and the opportunities you may have that, if you just had a regular 9 to 5 could be a little different. So you have to really stay, committed and stay focused on where you think you can take your business.
That's awesome, man. Now, how old are your kids?
I've got a 3-year-old and a nearly 2-year-old. So we have sort of Irish twins, if you will. We got an active household right now.
Are you ready for this? I got 3 under 2.
Oh, okay. 3 under 2. Oh,
3 under 2 years old. Yes. Ooh. I have twin 6-month-olds, and I have a 23-month-old.
Wow. So the twins you got 2 for 1 after already having the first one.
We had Johnny first, who's the older one, and then we had the twins following him right after. I was like, whoa, gee Louise. But we wanted that. But to your point though, I love that you said that, man, because I said this recently to somebody on a different podcast, where it's like when you have a kid, right, or multiple kids, it shifts it makes things less like carefree in a way. Like, oh, if this doesn't work, fuck it, whatever. Yeah, I'll just do something else. It's like, but when you have a kid or children or a family, that's like, and also there's that other factor now that I think about where I'm like, you want your kids to see you like growing and stretching and being successful, right? So it's like you start to think about everything in that lens where it's like, you want to make your kids proud, you want to provide for your family, and all that great stuff because you're the role model, right? Like, sure. You and your wife, we're the role models, right? So it's like, it's such a different pressure, I feel like, like you want to do right by your family.
Oh, 100%. And I, it's a mixture of that. And I'm fortunate, Steve, my business partner is fortunate as well. Our wives, the breadwinners, and they're very patient as we build this. So it takes a little pressure off, although it kind of scoops back on top because there's a little bit of expectation of, you gotta bring some
Build
bread
it
to the
up.
table. Yeah, build it up. If I'm doing this and I'm sacrificing along with you, then there needs to be a payoff. So it certainly adds a little extra dose of focus, if you will. You stay, like you said, you don't have as many days where you think, screw it, I'll get to that tomorrow, or if we don't succeed in this venture or this effort to sell into this retailer or something, we'll do it again next year. It's like, you gotta
Right.
you gotta make sure you stay on task, and like you said, set that a good example as well for the kids, and just make sure that this is not just for fun. It's because you think there's value there.
Yeah. Well, man, I believe time is one asset we don't get back. So I really am grateful for you being here today with me. This is where you plug yourself, man. Where can people find you? Anywhere in the U.S. right now that's listening, tell them your site, socials, everything.
Yeah, appreciate it. So at Jalapa Jar, that's JALAPA JAR, at Jalapa Jar. You can find us on socials. You can find us at our website, which is also jalapajar.com. Easiest thing to do is go to Whole Foods. You can find us in the refrigerated section, wherever you find your favorite hummus or yogurts, things like that. We tend to be categorized in that same sort of deli section. And then you can order up from the website if you like, and hopefully you'll see us in Sprouts and Target and everything coming in 2025.
Boom, I love it. Well, yeah, you guys are gonna go wild in Target. I feel like that's.
I think so. I mean, that's a big next step. They're obviously such a massive retailer, but they have such a good niche of folks that tend to go there for their grocery needs, not just their underwear and socks, diapers.
I kind of feel like the person who shops at Whole Foods is also the person who goes to Target, right, for different things.
You're not only right, but I've heard that from Whole Foods execs who are like, I've seen a lot of brands make that next step by going there. And then, if you're really inspired and you're listening to this and you're in your car and you want to order it, you go to Amazon and they'll deliver you products from Whole Foods same day. So that's whenever somebody asks me to try it or comes on social media and wants to, do a post about us or something, I can deliver them salsa within 2 hours just from Whole Foods via Amazon. So,
well, that's a win-win-win.
Absolutely.
Good stuff, Tom. I really appreciate you, man. I'm grateful for the work that you and Steve are doing. Obviously, I love the product; it's amazing, and it's also just good to have like a good little snack with something that's healthy. Like when you look at most of these other salsas, especially like the major box brand ones, there's so much crazy like ingredients in them, right?
Oh yeah,
like
can't pronounce. Tons of stuff.
Yeah, so it's like, and now again, my kids are too young to be eating that stuff yet. But it's like I think about these things now, where I'm like, hey, like when I'm sitting there and I'm snacking. But here's one thing I'll say too, to your freaking credit, I'm gonna be like your poster boy. That's it. I'm gonna do a video testimonial in my production studio back there after this.
Awesome.
But literally, the one thing though that I started testing was because during COVID, very long story short, during COVID, I was one of those guys that like I'm used to traveling and flying here and there for my clients and stuff. And, I'm now for the first time in 16 years, I'm like pinned to my house and I can't go out. So I'm drinking like a fish. I'm eating like fucking crazy. And I put on like almost 35 pounds at that time. So then, me and my wife got on our diets and stuff. And so I'm always conscious because I fast for a majority of the day. I'll stop eating at like 8 p.m. and then I'll start eating it the next day at 3 p.m.
Oh, wow.
So literally I fast and then I'll be able to have like, the healthy food, but also one little cheat meal a day.
Right.
So the one thing I did when my sister got us on that, and I tanked the whole jar with my wife, was like, all right, we like these, let's get some more. And I would weigh myself because the days where I would cheat and have like pizza or like chips and some sort of dip or whatever, I would be like 2 pounds up, 3 pounds up, something like that. And so with this product, literally, I no joke, the first time I actually checked it, that next morning I didn't gain any extra weight. And I do have the chips though. I will get like the healthy chips that are like on the border of like not even tasting good because they're so healthy.
Right.
But the dip makes that better though. So like
right.
So it balances. But my point is that the next morning, every morning when I wake up, that's why for us we keep buying it in bulk like that because like we're notorious nighttime, like watching TV once the kids are sleeping, snackers. So we're like, all right, what can we eat healthier? And we both have gauged that like when we have an absolute shit ton of it, and obviously healthy chips with it, that there's a net negative movement of weight the next day.
That's awesome.
Which is fucking awesome.
Yeah, no, I've been hesitant to call it like a healthy thing. I think it's great salsa. People that like salsa can eat it. I don't want to get pigeonholed into it, so I just even on social and things like I don't even necessarily hashtag, healthy or vegan or whatever, but
right.
it is all those things. I mean, it's just fresh blended veggies. I mean, we literally bring in tomatoes, peppers, we fire roast everything, blend it together, and that's it. So it's a nice thing. My wife's vegan, and so I've gone through the process as I was, dating her and now married, of like, there's some blander things in that regard. And it's kind of what you're mentioning, the blander chips and stuff like that. It's the sacrifices we make, but what makes things, what enhances them? Well, good salsa, good hummus, things like that. And that's, again, hopefully we're an enhancement for those that are, keeping an eye on their diets and things like that, because it's still super flavorful without, packing any extra punch that you don't want.
That's what I love about it though. Like, because again, if I could eat that, and dude, I'm telling you, like, there have been times, especially with the sweet and heat, if I'm having that and like she went to bed early and I pop open a jar, there's 75% is gone, if not almost all of it. And again, like I said, seriously, like, I wake up the next morning and I don't really have any sort of net like weight gain. So it's like really beneficial in that way for people out there who are listening. They're like, hey, when I'm on the couch, I eat Doritos or whatever. It's like, if you have this with the shitty tasting healthy freaking chips, it's like it makes it all the better. As long as the chips, and it's a good combo, and the chips have a little salt on it. You gotta have a little salt on it.
Yeah, a little, yeah.
Just a little, But
nice.
Great stuff, Tommy. Very, very grateful for your time here today. I'll be a customer as long as you're popping them out. And like I said, grateful, man. So where can people find you?
You can find us at Whole Foods. So grab a jar.
Amazon, Whole Foods. And then did you say your website already?
Yeah, jalapajar.com. Jalapa, jalapajar.com. Yeah, no, appreciate it. Thanks for your time. And this was easy. You were hyping us up more than I had to do for ourselves. So this is great.
Dude, this is one of these things where it's like I'm a raving fan of the product coming into it. So I was like stoked coming into it. And my wife, it's funny though, because we had the kids, one morning that I went to bed early, came downstairs, she was hungover. She because I did the late shift and she was hanging out. So she had a couple glasses of wine and was eating it. And she goes, I just reached out to them, on Instagram. Like I was having a couple glasses of wine. I'm like, this would be great on the podcast. So literally the next morning, I'm like, and she's like, I think he booked. I'm like, no fucking way. I'm like, this is awesome. So dude, super grateful, man. I love the product.
Likewise. Appreciate it, man.
All right, man. We'll talk soon. Thanks, Tommy.